Ladies and gentlemen, the unusual artistry of Sid Croft.
Am I on? I am live.
You're live.
I am live. And here we are, and thank you so much for tuning in. You know, every week we always have something really different. And this week is about puppetry. And as you know, it's totally my world from the age of 10. And that's 84 years, and I'm still playing with dolls. Can you believe it? At my age. And wow, it's taken me on such an incredible journey. In 1940, when I went to my dad, I saw, you've heard this, hear it again. I went to my dad, I saw the first puppet show I ever saw in my life. And so I went to my dad and I said, can I buy a puppet? I saw a puppet for sale for $3.98, right, Kelly?
Yes.
It was 98 cents. I kept saying 95.
Yes.
It was 3 cents. You know, that must have been for shipping. What do you think? Okay. So anyway, and my dad said, I love this. He said, you're a boy and you want a dolly. And wow, it was 15 years later when he said that to me, that the Queen of England had her charity. This was 55 or 54. And every year she would have a charity, her charity, a night of 100 stars. And I was asked the last minute to perform my 3 minutes. Can you imagine? 100 acts. It was a 5-hour show. Okay, and then she comes backstage with the lady in waiting. And when she got to me, I don't know what the lady said to her. She said, oh, what cute little dollies. And I heard, believe it or not, I heard my dad's voice, you know, and I almost gave her the finger. Oh, but I'm so happy I didn't. I'd still be in chains, locked up in some, I don't know, in the, where do they lock people up in?
I don't know, in the tower of something.
The tower, yeah, the tower. Okay, so today my guest is the biggest fan that I know of puppetry. And he's, listen to this, he's the founding CEO, artistic director of the American Theater for Puppetry Arts in Hudson Valley, New York. And it's nonprofit, and I'm so excited to have my really good friend, Darin Johnson. So Darin, just push that button like Kelly taught you this morning, and you're going to come on and we're going to have a blast.
We're just pushing buttons here.
Oh my God, there you are. It's like magic.
Hey Sid, how are you?
Yeah, maybe, does he have to turn his sound up?
No, it's you. We're
It's
good.
me. We're good.
Great.
We're good. Look how handsome you are.
Great to see you. I love your shirt.
Well, thank you. You know, it was so hot.
It is so hot.
And it is so hot right now. Usually we have a little breeze from the ocean and the mountains. Zero. The leaves are standing at attention. And so, you know what? We've got so much to talk about. And I want you to, first of all, I want everybody to know what you're about and tell us about yourself and why did you get into puppetry? I mean, what made you do that?
So, Sid, I'll tell you, similar to you, I fell in love with puppetry when I was very young. It was watching Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and the Thunderbirds and the Bozo Show, which was filmed in Chicago, I grew up in a small farm town about an hour from Chicago, and they had puppets on the Bozo Show. And then right after that was the Ray Rayner Show. And they had puppets. Garfield Goose was on there. And I just fell in love with these characters. And I think you and I are a lot alike in that we have wild imaginations. And puppetry kind of was a world of imagination because puppets could be things that humans weren't. And I think right at the beginning, I just fell in love with them. And I was very blessed to have parents. I came from a very middle-class family. My father was a high school PE teacher, and my mom was a bookkeeper. And we lived in a town of 900 people in rural Illinois. And everybody in my town was scared of Chicago, thought that's where bad things happen to people. But when I was very young, started taking us to Chicago to see plays and musicals and go to museums. And they encouraged my sister and I to be creative and embrace the arts. And so we would go to Chicago and see Sandy Duncan in Peter Pan. And the next week I was in green tights playing Peter Pan because my father had built a little proscenium theater in our basement, and we'd put on those shows. And I also, when I was 7, my parents took me to the first time to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey in Chicago. And I fell in love with the circus, the American circus. And we'd go every year and see the new edition of the show. And then we'd come back to Sheridan, Illinois, and we'd build a circus in our backyard and charge the neighbor kids to come and see it. And then puppetry. Because I loved puppetry, my dad built me a little puppet theater that would fold up. And I mostly was doing hand puppetry. So I bought hand puppets, but I also made them. And we had a nursing home in my little small town that had about 15 residents. And once a week, I'd take my little red wagon and pack up my puppet theater and my puppets and go up and put on a puppet show for a very captive audience. And so I just loved, again, I think the important thing is I had parents that encouraged me to explore my creativity and my passion for the arts and my imagination. And I think that is what, has led me to this journey kind of at the back end of my career to help advance puppetry arts in the United States.
Well, let me ask you something. I don't know how old you are. You're probably too young. But you mentioned Chicago. I played the Chicago Theater.
Oh.
I played the State Lake Theater. Wow. When they had, like, the Rockettes.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. Well, I know it was the year 1800, whatever it was. But, and the Palmer House. I played, the Conrad Hilton, which was first called the Stevens Hotel. Correct. I was always in a show on ice skates. They had an ice show in their nightclub room. Wow. And that show would run 6 months. And they'd book me 6 months, and then 6 months off. I went, on tour again. And then I played that hotel maybe 3 or 4 times. But you don't even mention Sid Croft. You keep saying Bozo the Clown, and what is going on? Are all those, well, Howdy Doody was in the 50s, right?
50s.
Yeah.
And Margot and Rufus Rose worked on, as you probably know, worked on the Howdy Doody show.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you talk about Tony Sarg, and you sent me about a week ago it was almost like a documentary that you shot at the exhibit. Uh, where was it at the Norman Rockwell Museum, right in
Yeah,
Massachusetts,
yes. So
Stockbridge.
yes, over the last 2 years, I've had the honor of working and partnering with the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, which is in the
Right.
heart of the Berkshires. And it's the most comprehensive exhibition on Tony Sarg that's ever been mounted. And
It
it's
was beautiful. It was
beautiful.
beautiful. Every room was just filled with art. And, Tony Sargent in 1939, I went to the New York World's Fair and I was hooked in the Wrigley building. I was hooked for the whole day. I didn't go see Tony Sargent. My love for puppetry was a year later. But in 1939, what really hooked me was the very first robot. And it was just, you couldn't get me to move out of that building. I just spent the whole day studying, or I'm just 1939. What am I? 9 years old. But that's an impression that I will never ever forget.
Well, and Sid, if I can share a little bit about that World's Fair, and what's important is that in 1939 is the last year that the Tony Sarg Marionette Company toured in the United States, and their last production was Robin Hood. And Tony Sarg actually did not perform at the 1939 World's Fair. He put all of his money in creating products. So he designed maps and linens and all these products for the World's Fair. And it was a bust. And it was the start of why Tony Sarg went into bankruptcy in 1939.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah.
And I also know that he designed the balloons for the Macy Thanksgiving, the first balloons, right?
Well, because, and I'll tell you the story of how this happened. So in 1924 is when R.H. Macy bought the rest of the block in Herald Square. So the original piece was only taking up a portion. He developed, and in 1924, it became the world's largest department store, right? And to commemorate that, he decided to have a Thanksgiving Day parade, which Tony Sarg was not a part of. But what happened that year is, to promote the parade, he called on Tony Sarg to do windows, holiday windows. And so on 5 windows that were separated by walls, the walls were taken down and they created a 70-foot long window tableau. And Sarg developed or created 27 scenes from fairy tales and nursery rhymes, and they were mechanical and animated. And it was the first time anybody had done that. So Tony Sarg is the guy who first invented holiday Christmas windows that moved. And he did the windows at Macy's from 1924 all the way to 1942 when he passed away. His appendix burst. But what happened was the parade, the first couple years of the parade, the big wow was wild animals from the Bronx Zoo. So they had lions and tigers and bears, and it was scaring the children. And so Macy called Tony, and he was in his studio, which was filled with marionettes. And R.H. Macy said, I need a big idea for the parade. And Tony Sarg said, how about upside down marionettes? And so that's what the balloons are. And the first balloon was in 1927, and it was Felix the cat. And it was filled with air and held up with poles. So it wasn't until 1928 that they were filled with helium. And from 1928 to 32, at the end of the parade, they would release the helium balloons, and they gave prizes to people that found the deflated balloons. But in 32, they had to stop it because one of the balloons hit an airplane.
Oh my God! Was that an accident?
Oh,
I mean, was that
total accident?
no? But nobody died, or the plane didn't crash.
But what's interesting about Tony Sarg is, you know, in the 1920s and 30s, he was uber famous, like Walt Disney.
I know it.
And now he's been forgotten about. And so I think what's awesome is you know, his primary job was illustrator. He's self-taught, never went to art school, but he was this incredible illustrator. And then he kind of, because his grandmother had a toy collection, which included some puppets, he became fascinated with puppets. And what happened was he was living in London, and he found a book about marionette theater. And it basically, and I'm paraphrasing, Sid, but it said something like, we need to find someone to bring marionette theater back and make it popular again. And he kind of took that as a charge. So there was a very famous marionette company that had toured in the United States called the Holden Marionettes. They were London-based, and Sarg went to them and asked if they would teach him how to build and be a puppeteer.
Wow. See, I never knew on any of this. Of course, he was gone. No, he passed away in 42.
42.
Isn't that right?
Yes.
42. So I was, you know, I just started in puppetry, and I know not too many years after, in the windows of Macy's, they would have a puppet show, because I knew a lot of the puppeteers, you know, that operated the puppets. But he also, I remember, and you told me you have one, he would sell a stage, a little puppet stage, right? A proscenium, and when my first audition was at the Phase Theater in Providence, Rhode Island, but I didn't have a stage. My mom let me use her kitchen table, and I turned it upside down.
Wow.
It was a disaster, with Christmas lights for footlights. And I went and auditioned in early morning to Mr. Fay. He thought he was the Ziegfeld of vaudeville, you know, and I couldn't even see him. He was sitting somewhere in the dark theater, and it was like springtime for Hitler. Everything fell apart. The scenery collapsed. Oh my God, it was a disaster. And a voice said, I got to tell you something. How dare you waste my valuable time? That was the most hideous audition I have ever seen. I started to cry, and my dad was with me because the music was on a Victrola that he had to keep winding. You know, they didn't even give me a mic. You could hardly hear it in the audience, the music playing. And so, and I'll never forget this. There was a janitor, and he was standing in the wings with his mop and pail. And as I cried out of the theater, bawling, just bawling, he said to me, "Hey kid, someday you're gonna be a huge star." Well, he was right. Thank you, whoever you were.
And you learn, and here's the important thing for young puppeteers, is you learn from those, you know, for every audition, you know, that you do, you know, you only get one yes for every 25 auditions maybe. And you learn from each of those audition experiences, even if you don't get the job, because it makes you better and you learn.
Well, I got into vaudeville because they never saw anything like that. And I knew nothing about puppetry. I didn't copy anybody, you know. I created my own stuff, and I knew the music was really important because my first agent was in the Brill building. I'm turning 15 years old, and he said, first you have to change your name, and he gave me the name Sid Croft with one F. I said it doesn't look big enough, so I added an F. He said, you got to get a theatrical haircut. I said, what's that? What's that going to cost? He said, it's 25 cents. Don't worry about it. I'll pay for that. You know, and you got to get sheet music. I said, I don't know shit about sheet music. He said, no, I'll help you because you chose some good music for your Victrola. And he said, I said, what do I say when I hand sheet music over to the pianist or whoever the conductor was? He said, just say, play as written, and that'll be really professional. And then I'm not even 15 years old. He books me in a nightclub in New Jersey. Oh my God. And we all could have been arrested, because you had to be, I think, 21 at that time. It could have been 18. But anyway, hey, I also heard, I always wanted to go every year to France, the World Puppetry Festival. Oh my God, you've been before, right?
I've been twice, actually. In fact,
Wow.
when I left previous to starting the American Theater for Puppetry Arts, I was a vice president of Old Sturbridge Village, which is a living history museum in Massachusetts. And when I decided to start this venture, I left the museum, and the very first thing I did about a week later was get on a plane and go to Charleville in France and
Right.
the festival. I don't speak French. I didn't know a single person there, but it was a life-changing experience because I was seeing puppet theater like I had never seen before. Even though many shows I didn't understand the language, the awesome thing about puppetry is it's a visual art form. And so even though I couldn't understand many of the words, I could understand what was happening, because I've always said that puppetry is like live animation. It's animation put on stage. And it's just an incredible experience, because what happens is you have your main stage performances at the International Puppet Theater Festival, but then they have an off festival which has more shows. Then they set up little tent towns that have shows in it that you can just go, so they're not on the program. And then there are street performers all through the city performing. And the festival takes place over, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 9 days. And it is just incredible. They even bring in a barge, the puppet barge, on the river. And
Oh my
they
God.
perform
Wow.
until 2 in the morning. So, I've been twice, and I'm going to be going this September. It always is in September. And I just got my main stage. I'm going to be there for 5, 6, 7 days, and I already have tickets to 38 shows.
Wow.
But I'll typically start seeing puppet shows at 8 in the morning, and I'll finish at about 2 a.m. So I'll probably see all in probably about 60 or 70 shows when I attend this fall.
You know what blows me away, Darin? Puppetry, because I've traveled all over the world and got paid for it because I was doing my act. I don't think I've ever been on a vacation. I mean, why? Traveling all over the world and performing and getting a check, or cash. Because in Europe, you get paid by the day, not by the week, and there's so much talent all over the world that hasn't even been tapped, because puppeteers, they do it on their own dime, and it's very expensive, and if you're not making a living from it, oh my God, can you imagine? And it's something, it takes so long to build a marionette, and 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 then you got to figure out what you want that marionette to do, and you string. There aren't books, you know, on. Yes, there are, you know, the trick puppets, but you figure it out on your own, because then it's original, you know. And up above your head, I see, oh my God, wait a minute,
You
from the Dean Martin show, right?
that's
Oh my God! And how did you get her?
I got her. There was a friend of mine who had her in a box for many, many years and said, you know what, I need to pass her on to someone. And so I purchased it this year. And Sid, you'll know this better than I will, but it's my understanding that there were maybe five
Five
characters.
girls. Yeah, they were the gold diggers. When they got fired, halfway through the first season, they got fired. Well, I got fired because Liberace, I knew him since 1952, and I toured with him in 58 and 59, all over the world. And I asked, we were on the Dean Martin show. They were the girls that Dean Martin talked to, you know, in Crushed Black. There were like 5, 6, 7, 8 puppeteers operating them, where they crushed them out, not with strings, with rods. And you didn't see them. And so you didn't see the puppeteers. And God, we've posted Colette many times, you know, one of the girls. And this one was like, almost like a valley girl, you know. She was so uppity.
Yeah,
and you know,
Cynthia.
then, right, yeah.
And it's my, and so I have one, because it was my understanding that for each of the girls there were 2 versions. One,
Right, marionettes. They did a production number, and then they Dean Martin came into their dressing room. You know, they had a dresser, a marionette, and they had, I think, a manager. You know who built those? Tony Urbano.
I
And
know.
designed them. The greatest puppeteer on the planet. Oh, manipulator. Well, he was, you know, he built the first Les Poupées de Paris, the first show, and the second, and then the third edition was built by Jack Shafton.
Okay.
Yeah, and another great puppeteer. Who is that?
Well, I was going to show you, speaking of
Oh my God, that's the Take It Away girl.
So
see
this,
those maracas, everybody? You know, that's Bill Campbell's design. And that puppet introduced Liberace. Oh,
wow.
she did a walk across in one. And
In Les Poupées?
In Les Poupées. And those maracas would be up against her chest because they look like tits. Yeah. And then she'd say, I'd like to introduce, you know, one of the biggest stars. And then she says, Liberace, ladies and gentlemen, Liberace, take it away. And then they were really maracas. Oh, it was fabulous. It got, you know, one of the biggest laughs, you know, in the show. But who's that ugly woman on the other side?
Yeah, who is that ugly woman over there?
So that is actually a transvestite ballet dancer named Bruce that was designed and built and performed by Dolores Hadley. And Dolores was from Kansas City, Missouri, and was a house mom and started making marionettes, and then ended up performing with her marionettes in parks in Kansas City, then the Kansas City Zoo. And then in 1973, Dolores got hired to perform at Worlds of Fun, which was a theme park in
Oh
Kansas City.
yeah, I know
And
it.
she had a gypsy wagon that had a stage in it, and her marionettes are just incredible. There was a number of years ago, her family put a lot of the collection up for auction, and I actually, this was the one I wanted to get because I thought it was amazing, and didn't get it. And then a couple of years later, the person that bought it wanted to sell it, and I was able to get it. But Sid, this is the one.
Oh, wait a minute. Who is that?
That's Gypsy Rose Lee.
Oh my God, I work with her.
And she,
Wow.
yeah.
Why is she so dark?
So I'm not sure why they did that, but it was built by a studio called APA Studios in Las Vegas, in New Jersey.
Yeah, I know it.
And supposedly they did some of the puppet builds for Mr. Rogers, but she's got about 25 strings, and all of her costume is held in with sewing needles that have a string on it, so you can pull the strings and she strips. And we think that she was built for a photo shoot, because I actually have, let me show you. So here's one of the original photos of her from that photo shoot.
Oh, wow.
And then here's
I had, oh wow, she's great. I had a stripper in my act, and she took off 9 pieces of clothes,
wow.
but took them off with her hand and put them down, and the string, I would let the string go, and it went with the garment that she put on a chaise lounge, you know. She was great.
So
Yeah.
Last for the pass from you.
Oh my God, wait a minute. That's from, oh my God, no way. Look at the good condition she's in. That's from a show, the very first show that we did for Six Flags in our 1,200 seat theater, 9 to 12 shows a day. And there were, I think, 8 or 12 of those that came down out of the ceiling of the theater. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, wait. What was the show? Hold on, wait. What was the show?
It was called Circus. and guess what? That was Patty Blackwood, another brilliant puppeteer. He was in that show as one of the lead puppeteer, and he designed and built that whole show. And because it was such a big hit in Georgia, then they built theaters for me in all the Six Flag parks. And I understand you worked in Busch Gardens in Wilmington, Virginia, right? We had a show there.
Yes. So I had a one-man show called The Enchanted Lab at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. And then I also performed at Six Flags Great America in Chicago and Six Flags St. Louis. Well, many centuries ago.
But wait a minute. We had a theater in St. Louis. We had like 30 or 40 puppeteers at the same time. And Wilmington, Busch Gardens, we would change a show every year. There'd be a brand new one, and we would rotate them, So it always took a year to do a 25-minute spectacle because
And how many times a day would they perform those shows, Sid?
9 to 12.
Wow.
Yeah. There were 2 crews, 7 days a week, beyond a nightmare for puppeteers because all day long they worked in the dark.
Wow.
And we always had a dressing room with a lot of light and games and you know, and huge refrigerator full of food, you know, and
Sounds horrible.
no, it was great. And all we paid them was probably
Food from the fridge.
no, we paid them no more than maybe $125 a week.
Wow.
They were all kids, and we had a school in Los Angeles, a free school where we taught you puppetry. Yeah, a puppet school, and so that was a huge success.
Wow.
But to get back to Ringling Brothers, that was in a building, not in the tent, because they stopped the tent in 53, I think.
Yeah. When Irvin Feld bought Ringling Brothers from John Ringling North, he took it to the arena. Yeah.
Well,
but
everybody out there,
we both
Ringling
Brothers.
I was in the circus,
Me too.
in the freak show, as the world's youngest puppeteer.
Wait, did you work in the circus too, Darin?
Yeah.
No, public relations.
Yeah, I was National Public Relations Director for Ringling Brothers for about 3.5 years.
Wow, isn't that crazy? How, you know, we're both, you know, it's, and you never saw my show, except Les Poupées de Paris. Did you see Les Poupées?
Oh,
no.
I've seen I've only seen videos, you know, a few video clips of the show. I mean, I grew up watching Land of the Lost.
Okay. So you do know.
Darin's probably like my age.
So don't tell anybody how old you are.
I'm only 25.
Oh, is that how old you feel?
Hey, what I'm going to say, because I know my dear friend Sid has a birthday coming up, and I'm going to say this, which is the biggest lesson that I've learned from my friend Sid Croft is that age is nothing. It's what's in your soul and heart. And when you carry that torch of passion and creativity and imagination, it doesn't matter how old you are. You can always remain young and vibrant and contributing to the world around you. And that's the lesson, Sid, that you taught me.
Wait a minute. Next Sunday, oh my God.
He's going to be 105.
94 years old. How the hell did I make it this far? I had a doctor on one of the shows, and I said, how come I'm still alive? It's like, it's crazy to me. And my mind is still working, you know, and I mean, I had a little setback about a month and a half ago. I fell, and holy shit, it just really like changed a lot of things. But I'll be back.
You're still here.
Me and Schwarzenegger. I'll be back. It's coming back. All back, you know.
And Sid, you asked me about like how I got into puppetry, right? But what I want to share is why I started the American Theater for Puppetry Arts. And there's two people that really were my inspiration for starting it. And one was you. And the
really?
second,
wow, I'm glad I get some credit. Yeah.
Bill Baird. And because you were both showmen, but you also understand one of the challenges facing puppetry is not all puppeteers create work that's commercially viable, right? So it's very artsy. But I think both Bill Baird and you understood that, hey, I want to be a puppeteer and I want to create great art, but I want to create great art that's going to sell a ticket and the public's going to be interested. And that's why I've created the American Theater for Puppetry Arts, because, you know, puppetry is, you know, the arts are underfunded in the United States. And then you have a niche form of art like puppetry, which gets no funding except for the Jim Henson Foundation. And you can't rely on one organization to fund a whole industry of puppetry. puppetry. And so, you know, my hope is through our work is that we can raise dollars and funds to create shows that tell great stories and the public wants to see them. And so right now we actually have two shows that we're creating, and our very first show will launch a year from this October, so October of 2024. The working title's Shivers, but it's a immersive Halloween puppet experience that's going to be the backstory about the boogeyman. And so it is not for small kids, you know, 12 and above, but we're going to have, what's going to be exciting, it's going to be in a tent, and it's a series of ghost stories and haunted house stories and witching stories. And it all leads up to the origin of the boogeyman. And we're going to have tabletop puppets. We're going to have 12-foot tall puppets, but it's going to be, you know, very theatrical, very immersive. It's going to have music. It's going to have song, but it's going to give audience members a little taste of all the different types of puppetry. And then our second show we're developing is about a super famous, kind of like Tony Sarg, super famous illustrator and writer who was famous in the 1920s and 30s, named Will James. And he was a cowboy who had an accident and had to stop being a cowboy. And he wrote 23 books for young adults about the authentic American cowboy and life on the range. And so we're developing a cowboy musical, and it'll be tabletop puppets that kind of intersect his biography with kind of the story of...
Sounds great.
Yeah, the story of the real American cowboy. You know, not bank robbers and not cowboys and Indians, but what it's like to live on the range and herd cattle and live under the stars. And so we're working on those two shows right now.
Oh, cool. Congratulations. Yeah, you told me about Shivers, and it sounds great. We've talked about it off and on, and
it's hard developing a show. We've had some hit and misses. Actually, we were hoping to launch it this year, but I believe that story is so important, that you have to have a great narrative and a great story arc, because if the audience isn't connected to the story, doesn't care about the characters, and these could be people characters or puppet characters, then they're not going to be committed to being involved in that story. And so we've really struggled to try to find what is that right story that is the audience is going to be excited about and want to sit there for an hour and 20 minutes and see the story.
Well, because Darin, you know, as young as I was when I started with puppetry, I don't know how I got that thought. I said, I don't think anyone's ever taken it totally into the adult world, you know, because puppetry and magic are for kids, you know, a little show in the backyard. Magicians used to do a trick at a birthday party or whatever. So David Copperfield took it, you know, way into the adult world. And I'm so proud that I did that too. Les Poupées de Paris, you have to be 21 to see it. I mean, it was tits and ass, but there weren't any F jokes or anything like that. A great, great score written by Sammy Kahn and Jimmy Van Heusen. As a matter of fact, there's a song in Les Poupées de Paris, Love is a Bore. It's on the People's album. Yeah. And
Of who?
Barbara Streisand.
Thank you.
Yeah, Barbara Streisand. Well, everybody knows the People's album.
I don't.
And so it was really her first hit from a puppet show.
Wow.
Give me a break, you know? And so Les Poupées de Paris played, you know, World's Fairs, and it traveled, and it played to over 9 million people, a puppet show.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think your Les Poupées de Paris is definitely changed America's perception of what puppetry could be, and showed that it didn't have to be just for children, that it could be this adult attraction. And I'm excited to say that, in the last 5 years, and I've probably seen in the last 5 years, oh my gosh, 300 or 400 puppet shows. Some of the most brilliant work that I've seen has been for adults. So,
yeah.
and
Well,
the work that the American Theater for Puppetry Arts is going to do, we will do only adult only shows, or shows that I always say for Harry Potter age and above, right? So like 11 or 12-year-olds and above. So I'm really excited to be able to push the boundaries of puppetry to create these experiences for more mature audiences, as you did with the Les Poupées.
I got to tell you something, Darin. Take a huge bow, because thank God there's someone out there, will not allow puppetry to slip away, And it was Kelly, when we were looking for a title for the show. Kelly said Sundays with Sid, yeah. And then she said the grandfather of puppetry. Well, that was Tony Sarg, wasn't it? Not the grandfather. He was the
father,
father of puppetry. So, you know me, I have to go one step higher.
Yeah.
Darin, thank you so much. I was really looking forward to this show. And, everybody out there, because Instagram will only for some reason, let us put 15 minutes on. So Kelly edits it, but then you can see it on YouTube the whole hour.
Oh, great.
And you got to watch the whole hour, because there's so much information. And that's why I'm on Instagram, everybody, because I want to talk about, way beyond Puff and Stuff and all the great shows. Well, I shouldn't say they're great. I'm going to let you say that, but you still remember them. That's what really makes me crazy. That's 50 years ago. How could you remember the characters? How could you remember the songs? What did I do? How did I? Yeah, to this day, I don't know why it has lived this long. And I thank everybody for that, because I have lived this long too.
Well,
And go ahead.
The reason people remember is because you created great work, right? And so people remember great creative work, and you push the boundaries of creativity both on television and on the stage. And that has, just like Tony Sarg inspired so many, next generation, Tony Sarg inspired Bill Baird and Rufus and Margot Rose and all these folks.
And the Muppets. Come
Absolutely.
on.
But you
Yeah.
inspired a whole generation of creative people, including myself. And I think we all have a duty to share our craft and inspire others to carry that torch. And that's what you've done for me.
Well, thank you so much. You're just my head is gonna explode any minute, but I thank everybody for tuning in. And like I said at the beginning of the show, every week I try to bring you someone, with a lot of information coming from so many different worlds. And thank you so much, Darin. You are awesome. And
You're welcome.
Keep going.
And this fall we'll be launching a new website, and it's really easy, americanpuppetry.org, and
Yeah.
also so we'll be launching our social media and our website later this fall. And I would just ask people, if they're interested in getting involved with the American Theater for Puppetry Arts, reach out, because we're looking for people to help us make puppetry front and center in the United States.
Well, do you know how we met before we go off? It was Michael Curry, wasn't it? Michael Curry. Everybody out there, you've got to know who Michael Curry is. Lion King, all the puppetry, and so many other Broadway shows. He's probably got 3 of them running right now.
Yeah,
he has a
Lion King, Frozen.
Yeah. And he has a big show in Vegas right now at the Wynn. And so, wow. Hallelujah for puppetry.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think the best part about puppetry is the people. And I think, Michael Curry, I was introduced to Michael Curry. He introduced us, and you to other folks. And I think the puppetry community in America is just a really special group of people who care about their craft and care about each other.
Thank you so much. And tune in next week. Please don't throw a cake in my face.
Oh, you're not allowed to ruin it for me.
Oh, I knew Kelly was, oh God.
Next Sunday is Sid's 94th birthday.
Isn't that crazy?
So excited.
Isn't that crazy? Because
Amazing.
my whole life I have said, and I will next week, every day is my birthday. I'm so grateful to be here. And go left, everybody.
What's 365 times 94? That's a lot of birthdays.
300. Holy shit. I was here when Lincoln was the president. Right? Wasn't I? Talk about presidents. Hey, thank you, everybody. Love you. See you next week. And don't you dare throw a pie at me.
Or do it. Do it.
No.
Thanks, Darin. You're the best.
You are the best. Have a beautiful day, rest of the day. It's nighttime where you are. New York.
It's almost 7, but the good news is it's still light out.
Well, then have a great dinner. And thank you again, Darin.
Thank you. Thank you, Sid.
And thank you, everybody. Wasn't that cool? I'll see you next week. 3 o'clock Pacific and 3 o'clock.
6 o'clock Eastern.
I mean, at 3 o'clock and Eastern. Oh, shit. I'm 94. What do you want? Next week. Okay. Love you all. To be continued.